Société de l'enquête de terre, c'est les gaillards qui aiment de s'amuser. Elle aime de bien, de boire des luttes de verre, pensant venir quand c'est un de rolling, un de rolling, un de rolling. Bon, ça va bien, les membres sont drôles, un de rolling, tenderly, et point de côte à disperser. Les sociétés de l'enquête de terre, c'est les gaillards qui aiment de s'amuser. Elle aime de bien, de boire des luttes de verre, pensant venir quand c'est tenderly.
We didn't have too much time to have fun. It was work day 7 days a week, and we had a farm with cows, and it was busy.
She raised 8 kids, 4 boys and 4 girls. And Pa grew up north, logging, like a lot of men would do at that time, do a log. And he'd go up there for I don't know how many months and mow, did all the chores, and bake bread in a wood stove, 10, 12 loaves, Oh, good bread, nice. And of course, she baked maybe twice a week, 8 people, 10 with her in mine. And then she had to do chores, milk the cows, would do all the girls. They weren't that old and they were milking. My mama, and she had a rush. Mon papa, c'était où il y a le nord. Elle travaillait fort parce qu'elle a 8 enfants, là, c'était où il y a le nord. Elle montait, ou le PV.
The women played a big part in the farms, especially in the Belgian communities. I found that the women were expected to do a lot more of the farm work. Like I said before, the milking was always the woman's job. And we had to help out in the field all summer too. I was a part of that all the while too. La Belge, les femmes travaillaient vraiment. Ce sont les femmes qui fallait monter la vache dans les aider à la clairie à temps. It was my job to drive the horses a lot when we were making hay. Well, that I could do where I couldn't handle the hay like they did at the loader that came up. And the same thing for picking up bundles to bring them to the trash machine. I had to drive the horses. And I was just a young kid, and I wasn't very strong, and the horses got away on me a couple times, but I survived. Il fallait aider la clairie, brancher à tout ça, surtout un job d'Allemagne, les chevaux. Et pour ramasser les foules, il fallait mener les chevaux, ramasser le grain, c'est la même affaire. Je suis jaune, je suis ni fort fort, et les chevaux couraient à vous. Sandy Padri. I think it's hard to tell all the young generation about this because they don't understand, they can't understand. I mean, in summer the milking was done right out in the cow yard. And you'd pull your stool up to a cow and she stood there and let you milk. Just more jaune, on montait la vache en maille, resté, c'est sauté un coup de vache. On put the sham de little vache, elle m'a mis la pomade.
My mom made a lot of clothes. We always had hand-me-downs from another sibling because we were at 10. But she took a lot of old clothes and made us new clothes with somebody else's. They Brahma del V lock and paid their boom.
Everybody made their own clothes in my day when my first bought and dress was when I started high school. my mother made all my clothes. And it even got to the point where they made clothes out of feed bags or flour bags or whatever, because they came in printed bags. And everybody had a sewing machine in those days, you know, and you got married, you went and lived at the in-laws, and there was a sewing machine there, or else that was your first thing that you had to buy was a sewing machine, because you know, you didn't go shopping. I mean, and you went did your shopping at your local general store. It wasn't called a grocery store because there was only a small corner of that store. General store was groceries. The rest of it was all everything else that you needed. And that's where you went and bought your fabric and made your clothes, everything you made. I remember my neighbor buying a blanket at the store because they gotten blankets in at the store. And it made coats for all the little girls out of the blankets material. Yes, the ladies did quilting, and you remember they didn't do quilting like the women do now. They made patches out of whatever old coats or whatever they had, old clothes that were torn and were not wearable anymore. They cut some pieces out of that were still good, and that's what they used to make a quilt.
In the wintertime, besides spinning the wool for them to make stocks and scarves and caps, they always had a quilting bee, and they'd have 4 bars. I don't know how to say how long. And then they'd make it into a square. You put the back, then you put the batting, and then you'd put a top. Well, if you put wool in, then you'd bow it. If you put, let's say, an old sheet in or something, then you'd stitch it. Well, that's what they'd do. They'd stitch. And the smaller you could make the stitches, the better it was. At our house, à Montjean, ma tante était venue une tortote pour faire des couvertes. Elle avait des bastons, il fallait faire un carré. Le penning is on chair pour tenir. Et ça chine. À faire pazzo comme on chemise pazzo. Alors on mettait le laine, alors on entend en clopette. Mais alors ça c'est devenu même parce que dans les salles lavées on couvert à bout de laine. Ça fait ça c'est d'hygiène qui la ligne le flotté. So that la ligne tout qu'est-ce que tu fais à bout des autres affaires. On a oui, elle essayer de faire de tout le petit pot dans le clopette, alors j'ai mis dans le clopette. Elle m'a fait la sauce se développer parce que ça c'est du bien.
In those days, rainwater was very important. So my dad had built a cistern, cement wall in the basement, and collecting the rainwater. And that was the water we had to use for washing clothes. So we had to take it out from the cistern, put it in a big boiler we had in the basement. It was a great big iron boiler, and then light the fire to it to heat it up. And it was dangerous, and it was kind of a hard job to do. And, il fallait tout laver sa look ou de l'eau de tof. Et ça fait, il fallait mettre l'eau de cistern et mettre dedans les grosses chauffages, ça se fait. Il faut faire un chauffe d'eau pour chauffer l'eau, pour laver sa look. Non, rien de fort aujourd'hui pour faire ça. C'est dangereux.
Mom was pregnant for me in 1927. She was warming the water to wash the clothes in the month of March, and the sparks came and the house all burned down.
The washing jobs were done with the wringer washers and you heated up the water and put it in the washing machine and wash your white clothes first and then the colored clothes afterwards and the dirty ones afterward in that same water. And then you had a wringer on the washing machine, and you'd put the wringer over the washing machine and wring them into the rinsing tub. And then after they went in, you punch them out in the clear water. Then you turn the wringer over to that tub, and you pass them through there in a dry basket that they go out and hang in line. Abin lavat ça se fait on machine à laver ou une tin qui chauffe une lèvre et mettent une côté dedans la machine à laver. Alors ils mettent le blanc dans premier dans laver ça. Alors ils mettent dans le strain doigt, the wringer. And så har det del fretteo i munnen lagt det der fretteo og nå er med inn røstrin du I'll känna på det sättet lagt det och då det la in I'll quattro sättet.
The summer it was nice. You could hang them out. You got sunshine and the wind would blow them. They were nice. But in the winter, you'd put them out. They were froze. Well, you couldn't leave them out overnight because you didn't know what was going to happen. So always you'd pick them up and bring them in the basement. So you'd hang it out in the morning. Shortly after noon, you'd pick them out and bring them in the basement and hang them on lines that we had strung down the basement so that they would dry. The next day, then you had to fold them up and put them away.
Well, we always got up early, so we had breakfast right after the chores were done. But about 9 o'clock, the men were hungry again. Come on, Emily, get us some lunch because we're hungry. That was meal number 2. And come lunchtime at noon, that was number 3. Well, from noon till night was a long time. So at 3 o'clock, come on, Emily, warm up the coffee. We're all hungry again. So there I went again. I was caught making a meal again at 3 o'clock. And then at supper time, of course, it was when the work was done without having to work in the dark. Sometimes 9, sometimes 9:30. And our routine was unpredictable and very, very hard. I'm the one that had to make the meals. On se lève tout de suite à Mouni 5 coups par jour. C'est ça au matin, à 6 heures. À 9 heures, il faut boire ce café à Mouni. À 12 heures, c'est ça déjeuner. À 3 heures, il avait une couronne au foin. Pour souper, c'est ça de 6 heures jusqu'à 9 heures on est. Et pendant qu'il tient så bra, c'est plover avec fyrflé på filovrachalis, alors c'est så patent, mais de son bien là, så peut venir devant YouTube.
That's all they had was a cook stove, and that was fired with wood. And, you know, that was the cooking. And there was no control on it, so you fired up and maybe you burned your cake. Well, we didn't even have cakes in my day. But the bread or whatever you cooked, you know, and okay, and I can explain that cook stove really well. You know, the first 2 covers were the hottest because they were right on top of the pot. And then the next 2 covers were not quite as hot. And the last 2 covers were just warm. And then on the end of that was the water reservoir, and that's where you had your warm water. On s'avait rien qu'un stuf à boire en mot jaune. Il fallait tirer de boire. Dans l'esté, ça fait le mot jaune chaud à toi parce qu'il fallait faire de boire dans le stuf. La cuillette, la première cuillette, elle est si chaude parce que c'est ça là qu'elle fait ça. Donc la deuxième cuillette, elle est ni si chaude, Eller det är en dekuvert as din ring om jag tjukt. Då har det Buddha tsosa soleo. Och den är där tjuteo. And there was no regulating on that stove. But you did the best you could. Okay, baking bread was a big job in those days. You know, it was an all-day job for sure. You made your dough in the morning, and then when it was risen, you had to keep fire in the house to keep it warm so it would rise. And when it was risen, then you had to bake it in that cook stove. And, you know, you couldn't control the temperature very well. If kuret paille fallait fait ça toute la semaine, ça c'est un gros job. Toute la journée, il fallait faire le job de manger une chose pour faire le pain lavé. Alors il fallait cuire dans le stufe au bois.
My grandmother used to live in a house, and in fact, it was just back here. They lived with 15 people in the house. She made 13 loaves of bread a week. And the bowl she used, and I've got it, is about that big, huge. And she would make the bread with the 15 people. And my mother always would say it was very hard for my grandma, and she died young.
16 loaves every other day. And about 6 or 7 pies. And we always had pie, and we always had loaves of bread. And we'd make them in a big Dutch oven outside, and we'd do them all at once. They'd make a big fire in this Dutch oven, pull all the ashes out, the embers or whatever was still left in it, and there was a grate at the bottom that they would fall underneath. It was a huge Dutch oven. We put everything in on a long board, and they'd bake. I don't know for how long she'd bake them, though, but there was a real thick crust on them. The bread was so good, and the pies, too. So that's, yeah. And Grandma and I would do that every other day. We'd do this. It was raisin pie and apple pie because that they had, you know. And they had lots. It was made with grease from the pork, you know, because we had that too. And with all the people she fed, we had lots of stuff. So she'd be, like I said, she was the cook. That's all she did was just cook all the time. No running water. Can you imagine how much she worked?
Yes, she would make the dough in the morning, but she would make the fillings the day before. So it took us a half a day for sure to make all those pies. We always had help to make the pies. And that was with prune and with rice, apple, with cheese, and that was the big deal on the Kermis, serving the pie. Elle fit le courin en vue de riz, de prune, de pommes, de fromage, tu sais. Elle se todo pour grande fieste à l'automne, ça se fait un grand jour, on servait. Yeah, my mother was always particular in having enough filling on the pie and enough cottage cheese to make it look good. Fallait mettre le fromage comme il faut tout, et le mettre bromette, sur ça. Elle lui tout fait ça. Il pousse, mais le courin au fil tout le jus de devant. Donc le pouce, elle fait ça tout le temps matin, elle commence.
Making butter. Yes. And homemade butter, of course. And I still have a butter churn at home. We churned our own butter. And our house was very small, so I seem to remember that we only made butter in summer when we had the churn outside or in the summer kitchen. And you know, you separated the cream from the milk and you put that cream, and I still have that. Now, the jugs in those days were not a glass jug like we have now. It's a crock jug. And I still have that at home with rennet in it, which was you put some of that rennet in the cream and it turned to butter much quicker. And then you had it in this barrel with a handle, and you turn that. And sometimes it took a long time before you got butter. And then, of course, it didn't have coloring in it like the butter you buy nowadays have coloring in it. Otherwise, it was pretty white. Il fallait faire nos bures nous-mêmes parce que on a venu on s'en va de l'achat de crème, on fait ça, c'est qu'on s'en va en mois jaune. Il fallait tourner ça en main, on crank à vous le tonya, il fallait tourner ça, le coconut, vraiment longtemps pour faire la bure. Ça, on boutique vendu pour faire ça. You had to mix salt with it, of course, or else, you needed your butter salted a bit. And that was just where you took that butter out of that churn and you put it on a breadboard and worked the butter in it. So they put it the beauty to be nasty nifty bon.
When they were butchering a pig, before they started butchering, they had to boil the water, and they used those big black pots, which were called chudad. They would boil the water and make sure it was hot before they killed the pig. So, quand ils tuaient nos pulsia, il fallait que bolin leo de un gros noir pot. And leo fallait faire square chut. When they killed a pig, they would take an axe or slit its throat, and they would lay the pig on a board, and they would pour the boiling hot water over the pig, which was covered with a burlap. Quand ils tuaient le pulsia, ils avaient pris le chut eo, voir chut, et ils vidin leo de sil pulsia. Tant que le pia est chou, alors ils prennent scrappy le poêle. So it had to be hot because the hair would come off easier and the skin was soft. Après que l'avien fait ça, donc, ils prennent le chou, ils coupent le pulsia, et ils prennent le chou, et la chine. They would take the meat, they would cut up the pig in quarters and whatever, and they would chop the meat to make sausages and trip. It was an all-day job. It was maybe dangerous with the boiling water and that, but that's the only way they could do it. And as they killed pigs, they also used to, I'm going to put this in extra, they traded the pigs for deer with the Indians. Quand ils finissent de tuer de pulsia, ils donnent la pulsia à la sauvage ils donnent nos cheveux.
Use all the parts of that pig, then we had to re-clean those feet in order to cook them and eat them, and then scrape use intestines for making sausage, and you had to really clean those intestines, lots of scraping and scalding to get those casings fit to make sausage with. And then that was another big job. You had to grind up with a hand grinder to grind up the meat, and cabbage, we always made trip out of it. And you had to grind that all up by hand with a hand grinder, not like you do nowadays. Ça fait faire la trip, il fallait nettoyer la pâte de pouja et les oreilles à toi pour faire d'artistes. Alors, il fallait scraper pour faire des sauces. Il fallait tout seulement, il fallait tout mettre ça à un crank. Ça fait ça sobre. Ça fait toute la journée, on n'avait ni qu'à faire. It would take all day to do those things, and we weren't done. Some of it was done the next day.